I once heard, "The answers lie in the questions we have yet to ask." And in part 2 of my conversation with Tiffany, she shared that the quality of our life depends on the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. Does this decision step me closer to the person that I want to become or the habit I want to shift? And when we begin to realize that where we are now is a result of the decisions we've made, we can begin to shift our choices, and in turn, our life. In part 2 of my conversation with Tiffany, we delve deeper into the mind game of change and explore the idea of giving our nervous system what it needs rather than what it craves. We revisit the comfort zone aha, realizing it's not comfortable, it's familiar, and we will choose the familiar over the unfamiliar, even when the familiar isn't healthy for us. And we delve into the soul questions of the Mind Game podcast to take us deeper behind the scenes as Tiffany shares the best thing that never happened and invites us to reframe how we respond to the choices we make when we are in survival mode. What if we choose a different meaning for what happened? What if we recognize that our self-sabotaging choices are often the result of trying to survive? And at its core, survival comes from a place of our subconscious wanting us to be okay, of wanting us to stay alive. Join us as Tiffany shares actionable strategies to make mindful choices as we navigate through life. Our experiences make us who we are, and sometimes we might have to repeat the lessons until we learn the level up. But she reminds us, our past experiences make us who we are, but they don't have to define our future. We get to decide. Let's rejoin the conversation. Yes, you've got about 60 seconds. Here comes the intro. Welcome to Mind Game, a podcast to level up your life. My name is Stephanie Painshaw, and I'm excited for you to join me on a journey behind the scenes where we'll dig into the stories of resilience, mindset, and unlock the simple habits that will help you change the game. Before we dive in, I want to express our gratitude for your continued support. Your energy powers our quest to provide content that encourages you to unlock new levels of personal growth and step out of your own comfort zone. If you're inspired by an idea or have a suggestion for a future topic, connect with us at mindgamelevelupyourlife.com. Your feedback is a power-up that helps us continue on this epic adventure. So if you're ready to get out of your own way and explore what you didn't know you needed to know, you've come to the right place. So buckle up, open up your mind. It's time to level up.
I've got a almost 2-year-old right now. And so we don't get a full night's sleep because he co-sleeps with us and wakes up in the middle of the night for a bottle still and everything like that. So I've started with myself during my daily check-ins. Some days I'm like, I need like 10 minutes in the sun. And I just go outside and I lay in the hammock or I just get some sun, my bare feet in the grass, whatever it is. And I feel so much more energized when I come back after that than if I just pushed through and ignored what my body was feeling. So that connection with yourself and constant checking in allows you, you would never drive your car without looking at the gas tank, periodically to see where you were for gas. But we live our life never actually checking our own internal gas tank. And that's where people become really overrun. They become burnt out. They, just become sick more often. Their immune system takes a beating. Their gut health takes a beating, all of that. So when we get that constant check-in, then we can see like, okay, this is where I'm at and this is what I need right now. And that's an important part of recalibrating the nervous system is actually listening to it and giving it what it needs, not what it craves, but what it needs in that moment to find more sense of calm and inner peace.
So many amazing things in there that you shared with us. I can certainly appreciate our daughter's 15 now. So we're at a different stage in life. We're at a point where now she has her learner's license. So learning to sit in the passenger seat is a whole other experience. But I remember she would get up multiple times in the night, and she loved to get up when the sun came up, which was fine in the winter because that was a lot longer. But in the summer, she would start to get up earlier and earlier. And so those moments when we are tired, and I appreciate that you said the hustle culture, how we've shifted into, I need to trade my time for money and I need to do more, and it's not okay to take a break. And if I don't know what I'm doing next, then I'm falling behind. And that reminder, I've had several guests on. One was a functional nutritionist, and she said, your body's talking to you all the time, just like you said. How many times a day do you actually stop and listen to what your body is telling you? I like that you've suggested the box breathing. Breath work is an area I'd really love to explore and learn more about because of the power of that to help us to regulate the nervous system or to stimulate the nervous system. I was listening to a pep talk the other day, and it talked about how we can activate certain parts of our brain. And it was sort of more sports related because my daughter was headed into a club volleyball tournament. But it talked about if we can activate a certain part of our brain and deactivate it in the opponent, then we will win. And the more we start to win, the more we start to loop into that ability to turn that part on, to take some of that anxiety or that unfamiliar piece and move it into, that means that we're learning something, we're stepping into something new, and that's okay, and how we start to shift that mindset. I do appreciate how you pointed out that the comfort zone isn't really comfortable. It's just familiar. I think that's a really great distinction between that. And an aha for me is it's comfortable only because it's familiar. It doesn't mean we really like it there. We just are more comfortable and would rather stay in that box than maybe work through the difficulty or the challenge, because it takes, you have to commit to making a change and moving forward. That pushing through that unfamiliar to the other side, we don't know if it's really worth it. It probably will change our life, but I don't know whether it's society or how we've just decided that we'll just stay in what we don't really like because it's familiar, because that's the story that we know. It's hard to write a new story. So I really appreciate all of the different parts that you're saying. When you talked about checking in with yourself, breathing, what do we need in that moment? How do I make that choice between the ice cream or the broccoli? Or for me, it would be chocolate and vegetables. Is there a way that, when I know I need to make that better choice, that I can help tip myself towards the better choice? Is there a strategy that will help me to build that consistency over time?
Yeah. So I always say the quality of our life depends on the quality of the questions that we ask ourselves. And so when you're craving chocolate or ice cream, but you need the vegetables or the broccoli, we can ask ourselves, what is the purpose of the chocolate? And does that benefit me long-term? Or is that about a short-term instant gratification? And what are the benefits? What are the benefits of the chocolate? What are the downfalls of the chocolate? What are the benefits of the veggies? And what are the downfalls of the veggies? And we can start to see if I always give in to the chocolate, then eventually my pants aren't going to fit. And then I'm going to have to go through the discomfort of going to the gym and losing weight. Or my blood sugar is going to spike. And then that type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes, whatever, runs in my family. And so that's something I have to be aware of. We can start seeing how all of our choices have led us, all of our decisions have led us to where we are now. And we can start making an alternate decision. And so maybe instead of eating the full chocolate bar, it's, okay, well, I'm going to eat my veggies and then I'm going to have one square of the chocolate. I don't have to completely deprive myself of things that I love, but maybe I'm going to choose a chocolate that has less, processed crap in it. I might choose a chocolate that has a higher chocolate or cacao count or something like that in it. I might just decrease the size that I have, but have my veggies first. A couple of years ago, I was working with a woman who, when she came to work with me, I also have a background in fitness. And so she was coming to me for some trauma healing, but knew of my fitness background. And she was very obese. So we started with a food journal, looking at what she was eating and how it was making her feel. And she was drinking 2 liters of Coke a day. And she said, I know that that's a lot of Coke and I know I need to cut it out. And every time I've tried in the past, I've failed. So she already believes she's going to fail if we start with that. So there's no point in me saying, well, you just have to quit. So what I said is, you can drink as much Coke as you want still, but you have to drink 2 liters of water first. And so a lot of times when we tell ourselves we can't do something, the unconscious mind actually is unable to process not. So like everything that we say, you get a picture in your mind. So if I tell you, or anybody with kids knows this, if you tell your kid, don't do that thing, right? Don't run onto the street. What do? They run onto the street because that's the picture you've just put in their mind. And so if I say, don't have Coke, you get a picture of Coke in your mind, and your brain is literally programmed to go out and find more of the pictures that you put into the mind. So now you're craving Coke even more than you were before. So I said, you can have as much Coke as you want. You just have to drink 2 liters of water first. And she was like, okay. And like within a week and a half, she was completely off Coke. Because if you're drinking 2 liters of water first, you're already visiting the restroom enough that you don't want to keep putting more liquid in your body. And by the time you finish the 2 liters of water, you're good, right? You don't want to drink anything else. And so sometimes it's not about taking things away, but it's what can I put in front of that that's going to decrease the craving that my nervous system has? Or what can I do instead? What's a better plan that's going to lead to a better outcome?
I appreciate that. What could I do to make this just a tiny bit healthier? I appreciate that you don't have to not have the chocolate, but perhaps you decrease it, or I have to do something before I get to that part of it. And chocolate is just one of the things that I like. For the viewers out there, that could be anything for you. It could be doing your exercise before you sit down in that chair that you know you won't get out of. I know in the last year and a half, I've shifted into creating that space in the day for myself to work out. I have a minimum must do, can't fail. I have to do 10 minutes of movement every day at least. And on some days I can get to an hour of weights and training and cardio, but it's that, I appreciate what you said, priming your brain. And I think you were referencing the reticular activating system, the RAS, with that image and that picture when we say don't. And so if you can fill that with the image of what you can do, that can help to shift. But I think that's a very practical strategy. It doesn't have to be a complete removal, but what's something I could stack in front of it? Or how do I make that slightly healthier? What do I do before I get to do the thing that I know I'm always going to do? You made an interesting comment about one of your clients, and you said she already believed she was going to fail. So she signed up to work with you. You tell her about shifting away from Coke, adding the water in. She's already thinking that she's going to fail. Does that fairly frequent that we kind of have that self-fulfilling prophecy that I'm going to try this, I'm going to try fitness, but I probably won't do it anyway, but I did try, but it didn't work out. Is there ways that we can help shift through that, or parts that maybe it's recognizing something that we can help? Because people will say to me, well, how do you do that for an hour a day? How do you work out for an hour a day? Or how do you make that healthier choice? How did you get there?
Yeah. So the thing is that we give meaning to everything. So we can look at the past times where we've gone to the gym and we haven't stayed consistent, or we've fallen off the bandwagon, however you want to look at it. Right. And we can give that a meaning of we failed, or we can give it a meaning of we weren't really ready to make that change. We can give it the meaning of we didn't have the resources or the support system or the structure in place to help us succeed. We can give that a million different meanings. And so for the client, she actually came to work with me on trauma healing. And then when she found out that I had a fitness background, asked for some support there. And she didn't believe that she could quit Coke just cold turkey. She never considered stacking something in front of it, and that would take away the cravings. But I would say, especially, it is fairly common that people will come and they'll be like, I've tried all these things before and nothing has worked, but they're still committed, or they're still willing to explore, right, curious about finding a new way forward. If somebody comes to me and says, I don't think this will work, but let's try it anyways, my response is always, if you don't believe it'll work, then it won't. And so I'm not going to waste your time and money, and I'm not going to waste my time. So if you're open, at least open. You don't have to believe something will work, but you have to be open to the possibility that it could. You have to allow yourself to get curious. Then there's the possibility of making transformation. But if you're like, there's no way that this will work, then it won't. And so I personally won't waste your time or mine.
It is so true. What we decide, that's often we are that self-fulfilling prophecy of where we go. I appreciate that open. Are we at least open to the possibility that it could shift and be different this time? And that if we're closed, we're just not at a point to be ready. And that's not the time to invest in that. And the other word I really like is that you've said it a few times, is being curious. If you can be curious and follow that curiosity, that can open up our mind and shift how we see those different pieces. You constantly reframe into a growth mindset, which I appreciate, that idea that we can always keep growing and that we can keep leveling up. And so as we shift in the podcast here, I usually break it into 2 parts, and I always try to end with an episode challenge. So you've given me a lot of ideas of some simple steps that viewers could take at the end of the episode and try those out. One of my favorite questions that I've come across, it actually comes from Dwayne Johnson. And it's, what's the best thing that's never happened? And so he was all about football growing up. He was going to play professionally, didn't make it into the
Stampeders.
Pardon me?
He played for the Calgary Stampeders.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So he went to the CFL to play with the Calgary Stampeders, and then they cut him. And he only had $7 in his pocket. So that's why his production companies are $7. But he said he came home and he said, football was my entire life. That's what I was doing. That's what I trained for. And now it's done. And he said, I had to make a decision. And he said, that's when he shifted into wrestling, because that was what his dad did. And his dad said, you must be crazy. Like, Calgary actually called you to come back. You should go and play football. It's what you wanted to do. And he said, no, I want to be in a wrestling business. And he said, if football had happened, then the rest of his life wouldn't have never worked out the same. So the best thing that never happened for Dwayne Johnson was football, because it pushed him to a career in wrestling, which wasn't easy. He said there was lots of hard times, but it pushed him into a path and a life's purpose where he has a much greater impact on the world. So what's the best thing that's never happened for you?
I mean, I would say the best thing that never happened was that I never stepped in front of, I didn't quite share this part, but while I was going through the miscarriage and everything like that, I was living in Melbourne, so a city of about 5 million people. And I was trying to paste the smile on my face. And everything's okay. But inside, the pain was just growing every day. And I left a business meeting on a Friday afternoon. I'm in downtown Melbourne, all these people laughing and joking around me, talking about their plans for the future. And the only thing I could think of was I didn't know how to get this pain to stop. There was no light at the end of the tunnel at that point. And as I was standing at the corner, I saw this taxi coming, and I thought, if I just take a step, my pain goes away. And mentally, I committed to taking a step, but my feet were rooted to the ground. And so the best thing that never happened to me is that I never took that step.
And I'm very glad that you didn't, because I wouldn't have the opportunity to be here to learn from you. And I appreciate the honesty that you bring to the podcast and to share those, because I think sometimes as a society, we're afraid to talk about those different pieces, that we've felt those different types of emotions, that we considered doing those different things. But the fact that you stayed where you were and didn't take that step, that truly is the best thing that never happened. And so is there anything else you feel that sort of pushed you back to your purpose? I had a friend on the podcast, and she said, she was curious. She said, do you think there's people out there that can avoid their purpose? Because she said, do you not feel like the universe sort of bumps you back towards it? If you go in a different direction, it kind of pushes you back. Your mission is to help 1 million people to heal that trauma and level up their life. Do you feel like the universe kind of keeps pushing you back on that path and keeps helping you to level up?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. I think we get the opportunity to learn the same lesson over and over until we get it. And it becomes more and more painful each time, because pain is our greatest catalyst for change. So I think we'll always be pushed back towards where we're supposed to be. I think some people will ultimately go to their grave avoiding it. But when a door closes for me, I've learned to recognize that as I'm not being rejected, but I'm being redirected towards something that's more in alignment with what I'm here to do.
And alignment, I think that's something that's come up in the other podcasts and conversations with people, is when you are in alignment, you start to see, I had a friend that I just interviewed that said, I lost my job. And that was okay. I was going to get a better job. She said, in the past, I wouldn't have been able to think about it like that. She said, I ended up now at a tech company. She's like, I'm not even techie. My life has evolved and ended up there. So I think it does continue to redirect us and push us in those directions. So my next question, as we work to wrap up the podcast episode here, which again, I can't wait to go back and listen to this, as I'm sure the viewers, this will be a listen again episode. You shared so many amazing practical things that we can do, is if we think, and as a mother, I always think, okay, as my daughter grows up and you have a 2-year-old, what is it that I would tell my younger self that I could be more conscious of sharing with my daughter as she grows up, or you with your child as they grow up? So if you could go back to like teenager for me, because I think that's, I have a teenager right now. So that's what I often think is, how do I support her? But if you could go back and say something to your younger self, what would you tell your younger self?
I think there's 2 major things. Number 1 is I would let my younger self know that other people's words and actions were a reflection of how they felt, often about themselves, and was not necessarily a reflection of who I am or my worth. And the second thing, and this is something that we are super, super careful with my son, is to not catastrophize mistakes, to recognize that falling over, mistakes, part of the journey, and it's how we learn, and to celebrate each time we get back up instead of beating ourselves up for the fact that we have to stand up again.
Well said. The fear of failure, I think, and both pieces of what you shared affect us all the way through life, not just as young children. But you are right. We do make mistakes. We do experience things that don't go our way, but it's how we choose to stand up and learn from that and continue to grow forward that's important. This one I don't email out to guests in advance, and I listen to it, I think, in a motivational talk when I'm out at lunchtime for a walk. I try to get outside. I work in central office at the school division, so I do lots of video calls, and sometimes I'm out in schools, but I try to get outside and get some sunshine, if possible, in Saskatchewan. It's a little chilly in the winter, so sometimes I walk inside, but movement is helpful. And I'm always listening to different podcasts or pep talks. And the speaker said, if your future self, so in 20, 30, 40 years, your future self came back to you right now at this point in time, what would she say to you? What would future Tiffany say to you right now about the work that you're doing?
I think she would say we did it. And I think this is a good question. I've been asked this. I think she would say we did it. And I would think she would say, there's a lot of thank yous waiting. Because I think sometimes it's easier to take that step outside of our comfort zone when it's not just about us anymore. Oftentimes, whenever we're going through a growth phase and I'm, getting caught up in my own stuff, I remember that there's somebody out there that's waiting to hear the message. And it's a lot easier to take that step for them sometimes.
That's a very good point. Like you said earlier, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that is a good way to think about it. If you're getting stuck about, do you take that step? Your story can make a difference to somebody else. They're just waiting for you to tell that. So I appreciate that encouragement. I know starting a podcast was scary, to hit play or publish, to actually hit publish and put it out there, because it's a whole step into that unfamiliar. I appreciate that your future self is thanking you for the work that you did right now, that's going to make a difference. And it is one of my favorite questions. I thought that's something that we often think about going back. What will we say to our younger self? But what would our future self say to us right now? And sometimes I find that that's the reminder to keep going, keep doing what's hard, keep learning, keep meeting new people. And I appreciate how social media has brought me together with you today, the chance to connect with you and learn from you. I think your clients are extremely fortunate to work with you with a background in fitness, understanding the psychology of the brain, the nervous system. It truly is a holistic approach to healing, and that the joy and the life that you've always wanted, that maybe you haven't even dreamed of, is just on the other side of going through what seems really hard and difficult. But there's amazing people like you and your husband who can help coach you through that. You don't have to do everything on your own, where it's stressful because you find things that don't work and you're not sure what will work. And I appreciate the energy that you invest into sharing that with all of us and for so freely sharing different tips and ideas with us on the podcast. Is there any other question that you wish somebody had asked you that you haven't had a chance to share that you would like to share with viewers?
I would just say that, in the moments when you feel like giving up or you feel like, oh, I'm just sabotaged myself again, to choose a different meaning. When we realize that self-sabotage is really just our survival patterns, then, or we're judging ourselves for something that we've done, to recognize that everything that we do comes from a positive intention. And that when we start to recognize that positive intention, when we start to recognize that our ego or those survival patterns come from the deepest place of love for ourselves and desire to survive, that it changes everything. And so when you start looking at, what was really the intention behind this and start giving yourself some love and grace, that's where things change. Shaming, judging, criticizing, it doesn't change anybody's behavior in the long term for the better. It might for the short term because they're afraid of the judgment or the criticism, but ultimately it'll stunt people. So just choose love for yourself first and then others.
I think that is always a fantastic reminder. And if we wouldn't say it to a friend, then why do we choose to say it to ourselves? So the giving ourselves some compassion and that grace that we are learning, that we are attempting to level up our lives, to try new strategies. And when we do that, it is out of the familiar, right? We're out of that zone where we're used to. We're trying to work through perhaps different challenges. But the best way through that is not to stay behind it or not venture out. It's to go through that and take those steps to the you on the other side. And so I think the only other thing I had emailed about was if there was a quotation that you really love. I love reading quotations. I was looking at it's over here on my other monitor, your Instagram feed, and you have all sorts of quotations. And I always find those are what inspire me and what fills my social media feed. And I know people say there's all sorts of different things on social media feed. And when we popped on, I had shared that I really appreciate the positive energy that you share on social media. And you can choose what fills your social media by who you follow. And so I would highly recommend that all of viewers check out all of Tiffany's social media links. We will include those in the show notes below. She has an amazing freebie for us. And this podcast has just been the very tip of the iceberg of what she's has to share. And I appreciate the life experience that you bring to that. Is there a quotation or anything that really sort of is one that you always come back to that helps to inspire you?
Yeah, I don't know how inspirational it is, but the one that I always come back to is from Albert Einstein, that we can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. And so it's just a reminder that when we are in a challenge, to step outside of the challenge, to look at it from a different perspective. And that's where we find the solution and the way forward.
Well said. And it's interesting how I always think podcasts and books find me at the right time. And the podcast this morning, Kate Northrup said, she has a triple S philosophy. She said you have to stop. And then it was like looking for the signal. So what are the signals that are happening that are telling you that this is, you're headed down a path that doesn't work? And then she said you have to regulate. So part of that second S was to regulate. And there was another, it was a double S, but I can't remember right now what that S was. But the last S was to solve. So you have to stop where you're going, check something about the signal, and then you have to solve it. But she said you can't solve it in the dysregulated state that got you there, because then you get more of the same. So like you said, step out of that box, see it from a different perspective and move forward from there. So I thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. Absolutely amazing. This podcasting journey has set amazing people in front of me and allowed me to have conversations that I had never dreamed of having. So thank you so much for making the time all the way from Tennessee, former Calgary resident. So it's always nice to connect with another Canadian. And again, for anyone that has questions for Tiffany, please check the show notes. I can't wait to check out I think it was do you want to tell us what the freebie was?
Yes, it's my 7-day nervous system reset. It is the 7 exercises I start every single one of my private clients off with, so that the rest of the rise work that we do together is easy. So giving that to you guys for free.
And I very much appreciate that. And I know you have taken us down the path of getting us started. And that's the point of the Mind Game podcast, is to inspire people to see that there is a next step possible, because what's our first next step if we start in that direction that will help us to move towards the level up. If someone is interested in working with you or with your husband as a coach and doing some of that work, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and contact you to learn more?
So you can reach out to us on any of our social medias, or you can email me at tiffany@bluelotusmind.com. And that's the best way to reach us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I will wrap up the episode and say thank you for joining us. Until next time, we wish everyone all the best, and we can't wait to level up on the next episode. Thank you. Thank you to Tiffany for joining us on the Mind Game podcast and openly sharing her story. I appreciate the behind-the-scenes work that goes into moving through the challenges of life and choosing to level up. I admire her passion and willingness to give back to others on a similar journey. I've read that the closest thing to a time machine is an amazing mentor, to work with someone who has walked the path, tried different strategies, and found the ways that haven't worked, and has chosen to keep going. Someone who has leveled up because they chose to rise one more time. Be sure to check out Tiffany and her husband Sid's 7-day nervous system reset. And if you haven't yet listened to part 1 of my conversation with Tiffany, be sure to check out the RISE method that she shared with us. Here's the moments of the podcast that resonated with me. Number 1, it's important to regularly check in with your body. It's an important part of recalibrating your nervous system. Remember to give your body what it needs, not what it craves. Breathing techniques can help all of us. Try the box breathing technique. 3, the comfort zone is really what we're familiar with, and we are wired to choose the familiar even when it's painful over the unknown, even if the unknown could be better. Number 4, when you are working to level up and shift a habit or a routine, consider the questions you ask yourself. What's the purpose? What are the benefits? The long-term gains? The short-term gratification? What's the cost of the long term? And when you begin to see that you are the result of the choices you make, the power returns to you. You can choose to make a slightly healthier choice. You can choose to make a better decision. Think about how you can stack a small healthy win in front of the thing that you want. For me, it could be drinking a glass of water before I have that chocolate. Consider, how can I make this decision just a little bit healthier before I go to what I've always done? Tiffany shared with us that when we tell our subconscious, no, you can't have that, or don't do that, it actually wires our brain to notice all of the things that we just told ourselves we couldn't have. It activates our RAS, our reticular activating system. Number 6, when you feel like you've tried and failed, or you keep repeating the same thing, stop and think about the meaning you are assigning to it. Reframe your response to recognize that when we act in survival mode, it comes from a place of love. Our subconscious is trying to keep us in the familiar. Recognize that it means well, but you don't have to stay there. Pain, or the lessons we sometimes keep repeating. Pain can be our greatest catalyst for change. Use it to propel your life forward. Reframe the pain of rejection into the idea that you are being redirected. Let me say that one more time. Rejection is really a redirection. We've all heard this one before, but the next time someone's words or actions hurt you, remember to step back and consider that they are a reflection of where that person is at on their journey, not you. It's not easy, but we can all work on reframing. Number 10, failure is how we learn. It's not who we are. It's getting back up more times than you fall. It's being brave enough to take one more step forward. And number 11, because I love a good quotation, Tiffany shared Albert Einstein's reminder that we can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created it. Step out of the challenge and consider it from a different perspective. There's often a level up hidden inside the challenge. Thank you to Tiffany for sharing her journey with us. And if you're interested in connecting with Tiffany, trying out the 7-day nervous system reset, or working with Tiffany, be sure to check out the show notes for details. P.S. Tiffany works closely with her husband, Sid. He's going to join us on a future podcast episode to share his story. Be sure to follow the Mind Game podcast to catch our future conversations. Thank you for joining me on the journey to level up. I appreciate your support. Thanks for listening. Here's your Mind Game Episode 20 Level Up Challenge. Share this episode and choose a habit that you'd like to level up. What's one healthier thing you can stack in front of this habit that will help start the change? For me, it would be drinking a glass of water before I have that chocolate. Let us know what you added in front of the habit you are trying to shift and how that worked for you. Hashtag it, level up your life. Thank you for choosing to listen to Mind Game, a podcast to level up your life. We hope that you've enjoyed the insights, inspiration, and habits shared in this episode. Your support is a game changer, and we are incredibly grateful to be on this journey with such an amazing community of listeners. If you have any wonders, questions, or suggestions about this or future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media and share your feedback. Remember, you can catch all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring valuable content to you, our listeners. Don't want to miss the next episode? Join our Facebook group and email list and get ahead of the game. Until next time, remember to mind the game so that you can get out of your own way and level up your life.